praying. Grant, O Lord, the men and women of our nation may devote themselves to the common cause, not seeking gain for themselves, but giving much and taking little. In this time of testing, we all know the joy of service and the discipline of self-denial, for the sake of him who gave himself for us, our Savior Jesus Christ. Look graciously upon us, O Lord, our God, in this time of national sorrow and loss. Give us comfort, keep us steadfast, hold our faith, and enable us to find in you a refuge and strength, now and always. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever.
This House is in session. Meeting of the minutes held on Tuesday, July 28th, 2020, to be deferred.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor.
Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Petitions. Papers. Government notices. Private member notices. Notices of questions. Reports from select committees. First reading of bills. Statements by ministers. Congratulatory and/or victory speeches. Personal explanations. Motions for leave of absence. Or replies to questions. Notice of motion for adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance. Orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker,
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Order number 5, sir. Order number 5, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, to approve the lease to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Board of 2 parcels of land, the property of the Crown, situated at Marndell's Road, in the parcel of St. Michael in this island, for the purpose of the provision of health services and to facilitate development programs.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Before I commence, Mr. Speaker, as there are 4 housing resolutions all to be done, I would ask that we consider all 4 of them together as one cognate debate.
The question is that the 4 resolutions be all done as a cognate debate. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Continue, honourable member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. These housing resolutions are all part of government's intention to do various actions throughout the country. The first one, the housing resolution for Martindale's Road, is essentially so the Queen Elizabeth Hospital will get access to these lands to be able to provide for some parking facilities. It is a resolution that will be for 52,373 square meters and 12,823 square meters respectfully to be leased to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and has been certified by the Attorney General as being fit. Essentially, you would know that the Accident and Emergency Department is building a new construction on where a lot of the parking for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital has taken place in the past. And people are in fact parking on this land already. So the government has made a decision that we should regularize this matter and lease this land appropriately so that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital will be able to have access to this land. That is essentially the first resolution, so that we can provide for parking and other accesses for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the board. The second one is for the Botanical Gardens, and it is to 13 parcels of land at Friendship St. Michael for public purpose. Essentially, these are lands, some are small and some are large. So the first one is of the 13 is Beryl Padmore, 2,000 square meters, Roy Stonegill, 2,500 square meters, Valerie Padmore, 2,000, Friendship Plantation, 1,000 square meters, Percy Wiles, in care of Michael Searles, 4,000 square meters, Friendship Plantation, another one, 4,000 square meters, Goulburn Lashley, in care of Vernon Lashley, 2,000 square meters, Cameron Hewitt, in care of Gloria Hewitt, 1,000 square meters. The big one is going to be Friendship Farm Limited, 55 hectares. And then another one, Beverly Catlin, 1.9 hectares. And then Wilfred Braffett, 2.2 hectares. This is essentially so that we can continue the infrastructure of the Botanical Gardens. You would be aware that we have already started the work at the Botanical Gardens, which is essentially opposite what was the National Stadium. And this continues to make that larger area available so that we can develop a large green space in the St. Michael, St. George area, so that people will be able to access these lands, to be able to recreate. We've made a connection with a lot of people who are interested in getting a certain section to be able to put various plants relative to Barbados. We've also made contact with people of the diaspora to come and put their particular designs and their particular plans. We've seen the plans, and I'm very impressed with what the plans are for the Botanical Gardens. We need this extra space to be able to expand it and make it even better. And this is what this land acquisition is to do, so that we can make the Botanical Gardens an even larger, better green space, so people would be able to recreate and spend quality time, not only quantity time, but quality time in this area, which will become a larger Botanical Gardens for the people of Barbados. That is the second land acquisition, which will be for the Botanical Gardens. The third land acquisition is a small piece, just 358 square meters at Bush Hall Yard Gap. And this is for to acquire a location in that Bush Hall area for what we call the kiosk. Kiosk, you would have seen, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't know if you have, Mr. Speaker, if you have one of these in your area, but certainly the people of Bonnet have been able to benefit. And I believe in Minister, in the member for St. Michael East as well has had some benefit, where the ministry has started to construct kiosks that young people would have an opportunity, for argument, to put a hairdressing salon, fix cell phones, make products for sale, juices and so on, and access kiosks that would be built by the ministry, and they would then have these opportunities to rent and start small businesses. And there was one planned for this area in Bush Hall. Unfortunately, this land was not that of the Crown, but it belonged to let me get the correct name. It belonged to by Ladonia and Darren Daly, and it was valued at $69,300 on the last land tax roll. And we are hoping to acquire this to be able to build kiosks for young people to benefit from this small area in Bush Hall. And the final one, Mr. Speaker, is not in this St. Michael area as most of those, but this is actually in Belle Plaine, St. Andrew. And this is one that was dear to the former minister's heart, and I do understand fully why. Not only because it is in his constituency, but more importantly because it was the former property of Dame Edna Ermintrude Bourne. And what we're hoping to do is to acquire this and make this then available to be held as a historic site and to be available for the people of Barbados. As you would know, Dame Edna Ermintrude Bourne was a member of this Honourable House. And at the previous, in fact, yes, Mr. Speaker, the first female member. And in fact, you know, our other place of meeting, we had a wonderful ceremony, and in fact, we named one of the committee rooms after her. And this is to follow on in recognition of the contribution that she's made, not only to St. Andrew, but to Barbados. And to get the opportunity to have her house then to become part of the national heritage of this country and to preserve her legacy. And this is why we're acquiring this property, and then over time we'll make good and have a better facility here at this location. So lots of housing resolutions, important for the mandate and the reason that the government of Barbados has come, and we are here to get about our policy and to get these programs put in place. And I'd ask, Mr. Speaker, that these resolutions do not pass. Pardon?
Only number 5.
Okay, so we do them one at a time. Correct. I'll ask, Mr. Speaker, that number 5 is the one for Martindale's Road. I'll ask that order number 5 do not pass. Manager says 5.
Honourable member for St. Philip West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I shan't be too long, but I really want to pick up from where the Honourable member left off in terms of these housing resolutions. Now, for a number of years, across the country, people have been crying out for housing resolutions, solutions rather than resolutions. And in a short space of time, this government has been able to at least begin to get the ball rolling, so to speak, to help people in places where this has been there. In the constituency of St. Philip South, St. Philip West in particular, when you talk about what conditions persons have been living under in the Rock Hall area, I mean, I have grown up within the constituency. I've seen it myself. We saw it start off with being one house here, 2 houses there, and then it just exploded and expanded. And these things don't happen because people are just willfully doing things. These things happen when oftentimes people can't do any better. And everyone has to live, like it or not. And sometimes we can get upset about these things. I'd rather take the other approach, which is to be more understanding and try to see how we can correct these things. And the Honourable Minister has placed before this Parliament and before the rest of Barbados a plan and a way forward to help these people. And for me, it is important that while we seek to oftentimes criticize and complain about all sorts of things, that whenever we get the opportunity to say well done, that we should take that opportunity and say well done. And this is one of those times when I want to stand and say well done to the former minister and to the minister coming in. Because not only are we looking at housing in terms of just housing people, but when the minister talked about the resolution for Belle Plaine in particular, and this country has a way of, and I'm going to be very, very, very blunt, as I usually am about these things. The country has a way of maligning people, especially people who, for some reason, find themselves in positions like this, in politics, or even in the church, trying to help change people's lives. We have a way of being able to look at all the negative things and just talk about them. And now with the advent of this, the technology and stuff is even worse, because you can go to the Facebooks and the Instagrams and all the other things and malign people as you like to do it, and it's fine. But we've got to find a way, and we've got to be very brutally honest with ourselves when we look in the mirror. How many of us will take the time out to celebrate or to congratulate, or as younger people would say, give kudos to or big up people who have done exceptional things? And when you think about the work of the lady, I mean, look at the time when she came into politics. Look at the world within which we were living at that particular. I mean, these things are almost like unprecedented feats that people in other parts, different parts of the world themselves would marvel at. And we've been able to do these things on 166 square miles with an extremely small population, with exceptionally small resources of material things. And you've had people make these, in my mind, huge leaps. It takes a certain amount of belief in self to even at that particular point in time to say you want to get involved in politics as a black woman. These are things that we must celebrate. These are things that we must pass on from one generation to the next. And it's not just through an academic exercise, but in doing the things like what the minister is seeking to do, in preserving the legacy by preserving monuments that can stand the test of time, that people can see this is where this lady began. This is where she lived. This is where she was raised. Who are the people, who are the parents, who are the grandparents that installed the kind of confidence within her, who are the teachers to get her to be the person that she was. These things are important. These things are part and parcel of creating that new national consciousness that we speak so eloquently about. And so, Mr. Speaker, I really, really feel that today is, as I will always say, another good day in Parliament, when a resolution like this can come to the forefront. I know these things oftentimes are not as, and let me choose my words carefully, they're not as sexy as some of the other things that people want to hear about. You know, we probably like to hear that we build a brand new hospital with all of the great equipment and thing in it and all these things, and these kinds of things will pass as being nothing much. But as the minister responsible for culture, I see the importance in these things, and I can't let it pass, because like I said before, these are the things that help to build nationalism. These are the things that build identity. These are the things that build purpose. They might not seem fantastic to some people, like shiny things. I think I know that. But these things that can pass in here unnoticed, this is one that I will not allow to go unnoticed without having to say something about it, because it is very, very important. And in terms of being able to move, and I'm going to go back a little bit, to move those folks from the conditions within which they were. And I read a lot of the stuff that people had to say on the same social media and all of the other things. And I've heard the conversation, people talking about government taking up money to move these people who brought the law. And the conversation just goes on. And I ask the question time and time again. I ask the question at home, and I ask the question in here. Where is your humanity? They're human beings. And human beings have to survive, and they will do in sometimes whatever they think they need to do to survive. And so that if this government has found a way to improve those people's lives, I mean, let's just think about it seriously, because I think oftentimes people just let these things pass. What would have happened, God forbid, with all of those folks where they were in Rock Hall? If a plane coming up with running away had a malfunction or something, couldn't get off the ground. Mr. Speaker, could you imagine the type of devastation that would happen with all of those lives? Grandmothers, grandchildren, children, all sorts of things. And if it happened the night when everybody was in and shut down. People don't think about these things. They just like to criticize and talk. But it's important that people who have a little bit more vision, you see how important it is to move. And not only just to move, but to be a society is measured largely in how it treats to its most vulnerable people. And in this case, in this instance, I would say this is a test well passed. And I support that with every sinew in my body. It is important. It is also important when we're talking about vulnerable people that the Building Blocks program undertaken by the Ministry of Youth is again in an effort to help in the condition of young entrepreneurs, giving young people the opportunity to not just lime on a block, because there's some people who would like to get you to believe or want you to believe that they were never young and that they never made mistakes and that they never lime on a block and that they don't know nothing but nothing. So, well, I am not one. I grew up on a block. The block was different, but I grew up on a block just like anybody else. So I know it inside out. And it's not everything that happens on a block, so to speak, that's going to be negative. But I know in the time when I grew up on blocks, there was order. And the older persons on the block were responsible for the younger boys on the block. And so there were certain things that if it was happening on the block, if they were gambling, if they were starting to drink rum or what the other things to do, little fellas like myself had to go home. And then a discussion about it. And if I get slapped round my head for not wanting to go, and I went home and complained to my mother, well, it's more licks for me again. Because the society had order. That is the problem we face today, not the block. Order, gone. Ethics, gone. And so in this instance, where you're trying to bring some order again back to the blocks, the first thing you got to do is change the aesthetics of it. Because, like it or not, and I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, you know it well, if a person has low self-esteem, they don't think that they deserve certain things, they will behave the way they think about themselves. So that you pass somewhere and you see garbage pile up all outside the house, and they say, people, and I say this all the time, growing up in Barbados as a little boy, people where I grew up, they have a lot, but it's clean. You see somebody with a rake, somebody with a hoe, somebody got around the whole spick, span, had pride. And these things matter, so that improving what we have on the blocks, so to speak, in terms of getting the infrastructure to look good, in terms of being able to put some responsibility to those young men and young women to take care of these things, to start businesses, to think outside of the box, or but it's just a lineman spot, but it can become a business spot now. These things are important. Like I said before, they're not the fantastic high-rise things that other people will want to talk about as being things. But at the grassroots level, these things make a huge difference to the lives of people. And so, like I said, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to be long on this, but I really could not sit and not at least try to place in the public domain another viewpoint of how you view these kinds of resolutions when they come into this honorable chamber. And with those few words, I'm obliged to you.
I remember, it is so catch my eye. I remember Sir Michael West. Just remember.
Thank you, and I am aware of that. That's why I stood to my feet and remained on my feet, because I know I'd caught your eye.
It doesn't necessarily mean that, you know. People can sit down in a chair and also catch my eye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would want to associate myself fully with the comments made by the last honourable member who spoke, the member of St. Philip West. I might not be able to express myself as eloquently as he usually does and did on this occasion, but my sentiments are similar, and the issues which he raised, that I wanted to support him in those comments. I don't know if there's an issue with the Ministry of Housing, Mr. Speaker. When the former minister, the member for St. Andrew, honourable member, would condescend to offer us some comments in this chamber, they would be but very brief and few. And I really did expect a little bit more fulsome presentation from the incumbent, the honourable member for Christchurch West, as the Minister of Housing, but he was surprisingly a little brief himself and non-forthcoming on some issues that I potentially think constitute interests, or serious interests, the people of Barbados. I want to agree with the salute to Dame Ermintreat Bourne in relation to the acquisition of that property and the establishment of that site for historic purposes. I suppose that relates to part of our tourism product, but I think it also would relate very much to her own legacy and contribution to public life in Barbados and St. Andrew, and to education going forward in Barbados. So I want to support the intended salute to her. It is proper that this current administration take the initiative, I think. We are living in an era when there are more females, I think, who constitute membership to this Honourable Assembly, and perhaps similarly the upper house. I may be wrong in the latter case, but certainly we have more females in this current assembly than ever has been the case before. So I think it is fitting that this Parliament be the one to introduce a measure and pass a measure that gives salute and raises an honor, an additional honor to this particular lady in question, who would have pioneered, ventured into politics as a female, and coming to the Honourable Chamber at the highest level in Barbados at a time when perhaps it may have been thought by some or many to be undesirable. And you know, there are people who step out and do the unusual, the unaccustomed, and they do not know what she may have faced in terms of any objections or any aversion on the part of anybody to her desire to step forward into public life in the political arena. I do know, as personally coming from the church and having ventured into political life in the electoral space, a couple of decades ago, I would have been confronted by some who were not shy about expressing their view as to the role of Christians in politics, and particularly so somebody who was a minister of the church. I would hope, on reflection, looking back over the 20-something years, Mr. Speaker, I have made some contribution in this public space, but perhaps even more important, I would want to think that I have kept my public testimony and that my integrity is intact. Because one of the things I purposed from the beginning is that when the day does come, and we hope that it will tarry a while, but when the day does come that I depart this particular public space, I would have left off this aspect of service to the people of Barbados, but with my integrity intact and my witness as a Christian, as a minister of the gospel, still a credible one. And that is very important to me. So I salute the honor to the lady in question. Doing that, at the same time, I want to ask the Honourable Minister, and if he can't today, perhaps as soon as possible, convenience, to speak to us re the Frank Worrell House at Bank Hall, or the house associated with the name of Frank Worrell at Bank Hall in the constituency of St. Michael West. I know that in recent months there was a tour made there by the Honourable Member for St. Philip West in his capacity of Minister of Sports. And he was accompanied by the Minister of State in the Ministry of Housing, the Honourable Member of St. John at the time, and I thank them for having shown me the courtesy of inviting me to come along. And there was some discussion around that particular project, and which has long been in the arena of discussion. I remember several years ago proposing, when the Barbados Labour Party at that time was in administration, particularly so and specifically so with reference to this property, that something ought to be done to honor the memory of Frank Worrell, to not only salute him, but to provide and create a kind of facility that could speak to sporting development in Barbados, that can provide a legacy benefit and pass on by means of education relative to sport the merits of the life and contribution that he and persons such as himself would have made to the development of sports, particularly so cricket in Barbados and across the region, and the quality of leadership that came with the embodiment of that particular individual as well. In addition to that, I had suggested that that be done with some association with the Empire Club, which is just next door. You are familiar with these things. I'm saying these things for the benefit of the member of Christchurch West who is not known for any significant degree of familiarity with sports, either in being a spectator or a practitioner. So it's more for his benefit than for yours, Mr. Speaker. But that facility is still there. There's some questions, I think, around ownership. And I really want to raise it again. And if it is not yet on the radar of the new Minister of Housing, I would want to ensure that it gets there. Second one relates perhaps particularly more so to you, Mr. Speaker. I feel it important because I grew up in Station Hill, ran all around the Waterford, the Cumbermere space, all on top the hill, what we called it at the time, in the Bell Gully, and people call this place Bellevue now. Mr. Speaker, I really would want to hear the Minister's view as to what is to be done to address the squatters situation at Bellevue, parts of Station Hill. It really is expanding, and I am not standing in this moment, at this time, in this space to complain. I'm just asking a question as to whether or not it is on the Minister's agenda, as to what help can be given to persons who are now located there, perhaps in circumstances where they may find themselves outside of the law. And the squatters village is growing. I grew up just a matter of meters from where some of the houses of squatters are now located. You're familiar, very familiar with that area, Mr. Speaker. You represent that area, so you know about Bottom Gap and Top Gap and Middle Gap and Waterford and all of that. And in your interest, Mr. Speaker, but because of my past association, I am asking about that, and hopefully the Minister would want to give some attention on that issue. Now, the next one brings back unpleasant memories, and it has to do with the Wells program. And one got a sense that there was some urgency being attached to that program, where we had the unfortunate incident at the Pine. One tends to sense, perhaps, that the degree of urgency is not there because we've passed that unpleasant incident by now. I am not here to trade in blame, as was the case then by some voices. I am simply asking because I hear continued references to the fact that there are dangerous wells or uncovered wells in some of these public housing developments and communities. Therefore, perhaps the Minister can tell us as to where we are with that program, how far we have advanced. One does not want to know that the sense of urgency is lost because we have gone past a moment of unpleasantness and sad loss, because it can happen again. I happen to have witnessed a similar situation, not with the same unpleasant result, but potentially it could have been, where a young lady stepped out of her yard and dropped into a well on the property, just stepping out of the back door. So these things are important, and we can't wait till somebody is hurt or worse to attach urgency, and we certainly should not let that lie. I know the financial economic situation in Barbados and the state is such that we have to be prudent and perhaps sometimes partial in our spending, but I think where we're talking about risk to life and to limb and to life, we are talking about a serious situation which begs for urgency. We have the continuing spectre of unoccupied houses and buildings in Barbados, many of which are owned by the state. And I want to make this appeal, to hear early from this Minister. I know he's a very motivated individual and very energetic. And I would want to suggest to him that this is a waste in Barbados. It's not only a public health consideration, but it is a waste of resources in Barbados when we have large state-owned properties and buildings left to ruin and left unoccupied. And there's several of a private nature as well. And I think a serious inquiry needs to be mounted into the status of some of these privately owned derelict properties and houses, such that perhaps, if it is possible, use can be made of them. Cannot have a situation persisting in Barbados where multiple hundreds, thousands are without housing who would like to own their own houses. Multiple thousands have applications before the National Housing Corporation, and government is unable to respond. And yet at the same time, we have properties and buildings, privately and publicly owned, which are left unoccupied. I would hope that that constitutes a priority as well for the new minister. Do not know how long he has in the portfolio, but however enduring his stay might be, I would want to urge that that be given some significant measure of consideration. Now, the minister mentioned the acquisition of properties at Martindale's Road leased to the QEH. One understands that as well. But I also want to ask that he early, because we didn't get very much from the former voice on these matters. What is the position on the old property not far off the Queen Elizabeth Hospital that is owned by government? Used to house the old hospital, used to house the Ministry of Education and some other entities. There was a fire or two, but there was some measure of abandonment of those properties. What is the position over there? Because you are acquiring additional private property on Martindale's Road to enhance that which is available to the QEH, while at the same time we have publicly owned property not far away. And I think Barbadians could benefit from a hearing on what is the position with these old health and education building facilities. I've asked this before and I ask it again, and it's in your constituency again, Mr. Speaker, and I raise it. What is to befall the old prison property and the buildings located there? There's a large expanse of land. I think it does sit on the level 1 water table. Some issues with respect to that, but those are issues in this modern day which can be addressed. But the building seems now to be fully abandoned. You frequent the Bridge Road and areas like that. There are no trees growing out of the building, not growing in the yard, growing out of the building where there's no or little roof and pushing beyond the standing walls. That will damage the building. I believe the expanse of the property is such that it constitutes, if it continues to be unoccupied to that extent, unused, a public health problem looming for the people of Dean's Village, people of Station Hill, and the people of My Lord's Hill and Lake Bridge Village. And you know that, Mr. Speaker, that crosses your political area and the area for the Honourable Member of St. Michael East, who is not with us this morning. But that is a serious situation, potentially, and I would urge the Honourable Minister, if he's never gone to prison, to visit the site and see what it is like, what use can be made. You are developing a botanical gardens that stretches from the constituency of St. Michael Northeast across portions of St. Michael Central, St. Michael East. Prison is in St. Michael Central and just on the border of St. Michael East in the My Lord's Hill Prison Gully area. And I very much believe possibly it can be tied into the development of the botanical gardens in some way. I would really seriously, Mr. Speaker, since you can't speak in this chamber for yourself on these matters, really want to propose that the minister consider having a committee, a delegation of persons from those communities to get together and to probably make some recommendations to government as to how this property could be used to the benefit of those communities, but to the benefit of the wider Barbados. And I think that that is important. We are in an era where we want to democratize as far and as further as we can the governance of Barbados. This government gives a lot of credence to the whole notion of consultation, and consultation, participation by the people at a serious level can, just invite their opinion on matters such as this. I am sure the technical people who will be able to contribute. There are people who have been around for a long time and know the history of the area who can contribute. Make proper suggestions as to how this thing can be used, and not let it simply be another publicly owned property that sits there on a large space in densely populated areas, unused and left only to the occupation of vermin and rodents. And perhaps there was a time when prisoners on the inside or those criminally minded would have been looking to get out from the inside. It may be now we're in a situation there may be a few criminally minded looking to get in to see what is there to be taken. I think that the minister could do well to give to these matters some attention. I appreciate what the Honourable Member St. Philip West was saying. Sometimes we think it is these grand modern projects, a big new hospital, a spanking new school, or a big new airport plant. Those things are good. But there are these old buildings that can be put to proper use, which sometimes little address or redress. And I would urge that. Now, I like anything that seeks to promote the advancement, the well-being of the small man, or those who constitute some of the blocks around Barbados, like the Honourable Member St. Philip West. We all grew up on blocks. I'm sure you did too. Not so sure the Honourable Christchurch West did. Probably not, and he does not therefore have the experience on which to look back. But you did, I did, I'm sure the Honourable St. Philip West did. We all grew up on the blocks, and we did some of the things that the fellas do today. We use big rocks. These fellas use guns, some of them. And we did some little innocent stealing here and there. I raided Waterford plant. I shouldn't say that. I really shouldn't say that. I don't know the statute of limitation on these things. I was going to say I raided Waterford plantation many a time for cane and other stuff. And I suppose all of us did that. I may need your services, Mr. Speaker, if there's an issue with that. But that's the truth. So I know what it is to grow up among the fellows. You did what fellas, you did what fellas do today. Maybe there's a little bit more virulence and violence attaching to it today, but the impulses were the same. You get together as boys, and sometimes you get up to mischief. And sometimes it's for lack of viable things with which to engage yourself. And I will support anything that advances this small man and develops his business. And I trust that the new Minister of Small Business would get to this with diligence and vigilance. And together with the effort being mounted by the Ministry of Housing here and the Ministry of Youth and Ministry of Small Business, like I said, would really advance this cause. I don't think that we should pay lip service to this business of developing small business. I fear sometimes we do. It's a lot of lip service and sometimes a lot of low talk. But you really want actual and viable initiatives that will lift people from the level of poverty at which they now exist and give them a stake in this thing we call Barbados. And I therefore would want to support that. I therefore also further want to warn and caution against that small man, small space mindset. Because we think because a man's a small man, he must be confined to some small space. And it limits his capacity. It limits the capacity of the small person. Now, I think I read in this resolution, this is a cul-de-sac. We're locating these people in a cul-de-sac. I might be wrong, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. But I thought that is what I read. Now, if you're going to locate a business down inside a cul-de-sac, you have to consider certain possible implications there. I don't know that you, Mr. Speaker, want to drive into a cul-de-sac. It is not, well, if it is not, correct me where you stand, but I read something about some cul-de-sac. But the point I'm making is that you don't want to add to the limitations by creating this kind of a situation. And if you're going to develop a project for small business, don't get drawn into this small man, small space mindset. And don't put the small man in a situation where you add to the inbuilt limitations which might be already existing. So you have to think about parking. I drive in the Bushall Yard Gap, and this property is in Bushall, connect to Bushall Yard Gap. I don't know exactly. I go to Quimby Shop. You know Quimby Shop, Mr. Speaker. I get my cheese cutters at Quimby Shop. Yeah. And for years, 4 years, still do occasionally. And you know the difficulty with parking at Quimby Shop. And a bad accident is going to happen there one of these days. And I'm saying small businesses in communities can flourish, but you have to create the kind of conditions that will allow for them to flourish. And they come with inbuilt restrictions and limitations already on the capacity to be viable. And you do not want in any way to add to those limitations or to do. You know, pardon me. You don't want to add to those inbuilt limitations and restrictions. You pardon me, Mr. I thought for a moment the Honourable Christchurch East was coming to sit a little closer to me.
St. Michael.
St. Michael East. who's come to sit a little bit close to me, and I was worried about social distancing. That's all. That's all. And how it might appear to those who are viewing. So these are my concerns. I support this, but I invite the minister to give some attention to these matters. I hope he views them with some seriousness. And let me take the opportunity to wish him well in the new portfolio.
Honourable Member for St. George North.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend my support to the acquisition and the vesting of these 4 parcels of land across Barbados. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I would like to compliment the new Minister of Housing and Maintenance, as well as to say that the former minister have done a lot of work in preparing these acquisitions, and I want to also compliment the work that was done by the former Minister of Housing, and still is the member for St. Andrew. I must say from the outset too that I recognize the speech of the last honourable member, the leader of the opposition, and I was saying to myself that it seemed as though he saw my paper, and he, as accustomed, we went to the same school, and he was always a copier. And I noticed that he has copied a lot from what I have to say, but of course he did not go far enough, and he saw only what his eye could have gleaned. But I agreed with him totally that there are a number of things which we have to look at through the Ministry of Housing and Lands, especially when it comes to derelict buildings. And the member made the point that there are several derelict properties across St. Michael especially, and Barbados, that we need to look at carefully. And I would want to suggest that based on what the member have said, I would like to go even a stage further to say that properties such as the old hospital property and one at Bay Street, the Eye Hospital, those are 2 properties that need to be looked at immediately. And I thought that a committee set up by the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Town Planning Department, as well as the Ministry of Housing and Lands and the Environment should look at all of these derelict properties that are now housing unwanted persons in them. I am sure that the old hospital property can be developed as an economic site for the good of Barbados. I am sure, Mr. Speaker, that the Town Planning Department, comprised of people and knowledgeable persons working with the Ministry of Housing and Lands and the Environment, can help us look at a number of these properties to how is it in this day and age where we have persons who live on these properties. And I must remember that a young journalist that lost his life a couple of weeks ago because of somebody who may have been insane living on these properties. And we have properties like the old Louis Lynch property at White Park Road that, to my mind, can be used for the good of, if not education, can be used either in the hospitality industry, can be used for housing, can be used in tourism, so that we need to use the technical advice that we have in Barbados. We do not have to repeat the things, but there are lots of persons who are within the Ministry of Economic Affairs or the Town Planning Department, Ministry of Public Works and Housing, that can form a committee, as the member suggests, and let us do something at a holistic matter, because a lot of these are Crown lands. The properties that we are vesting at the QEH is really Crown land. It's a vesting. So we're vesting the property at Martindale's Road in the community hospital. A good thing. But we're hopeful that the community hospital can really develop this property as soon as possible, because as the member said, sometimes we acquire properties and they remain acquired for a long number of years and we do nothing with them. So I believe that the new minister should really move expeditiously to see how these properties can be developed and to see how we can use all the derelict properties that are Crown lands and even those that are private, in the private hands, that we can do something with it. We need to advise. The church, again, the Anglican church, they have a number of derelict properties across Barbados that needs to be done. Something needs to be done. I can think in terms of the old St. Joseph Church, that the church needs to do something with that property at Horace Hill. Church really needs to do something at Horace Hill. I can think of across all the properties at Dodge and St. Philip. Again, something needs to be done with the lands that the church owned at St. Philip, north of the St. Philip or east of the St. Philip Parish Church. Something needs to be done that. And all the school buildings across the old school buildings, Mr. Speaker, that needs to be done. Something needs to be done with these buildings because people, unwanted persons are now occupying them. Trees are growing through them. Vermin, as the member spoke of just now. So something has to be done with these derelict properties. And I thought that the member who spoke before me would have mentioned a number of private properties in his own constituency. I'm talking at a big property at Bush. I think it is north of in his own constituency in Barbados Hill. A derelict property there, that grass, all types of vermin growing through, a private property that the Ministry of Environment should really ask their environmental officer to go out and earmark these properties to be cleaned up. We have to do it. The other question, Mr. Speaker, is the question of acquisition. I noticed that the property at St. Andrew is to be acquired to honor the legacy of Dame Elsie Bourne. A good thing. But I'm wondering if the Ministry of Housing could not have used the approach of private treaty in this case. Because I think it's a good thing. But when you compulsory acquire, it sends a message, you compulsory acquiring a parcel of land. Have you spoken to the owners of this property? Have anything been done to ensure that the owners are in sync with you? Because I believe in many cases, and I'm citing the Trinidadian experience. In Trinidad, most properties are acquired through private treaty where you agree with the owners, where owners and government come together and you make an offer. Because I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the Ministry of Housing and Lands, the compulsory acquisition should be used, but it should only be used for public purpose in the instant where you cannot agree. Road acquisition for road acquisition, public purpose housing, tourism, or something of the sort. And where persons can be paid on time. The Ministry of Housing and Lands have on their books several parcels of land that acquired over the years and persons have not been paid for them. There is no agreement. It is not the fault of the Ministry of Housing. I want to make that quite clear. It's not the ministry fault. But wherever there is an acquisition for public purpose, I think there should be some form of a private treaty first. Let's look at the approach of private treaty. In recent times, you can think of a property that was to be acquired for public purpose on Bay Street, and the owner was asking outrageous figure. We have to look at that carefully. So those are things that have to be taken into consideration. Again, the land tax department need to look at how you value properties, because there are a number of properties that have had valuation way in extent in existence for long years, and they're not updated. So we have to look at the valuation and the value of properties. Although I know for sure that values can change. Values change over time, depends on who valuing it. But we have to look at this whole question of valuation as well, and how we can agree on a price. Because once you agree on the price, then the owner could be paid something before the acquisition, and then you agree that we are going to pay you over a period of time. And that approach can be done, because there are several times where the Ministry of Housing and Lands have money that has been put aside for these properties, and the owners will never agree. There's one owner who said years ago that she would not agree even if you acquire the property and the money is still there, and she died, gone. I'm not sure if her estate can ever will inherit that property. So we have to look at that approach as well. The question of the botanical garden, Mr. Speaker, is a good thing. Again, that's an acquisition for public purpose, and I think that I want to publicly say here that I thought that the last Minister of Environment was doing a very wonderful job, and the government at this time, to get the botanical garden going. I think that it is a good site, a good thing that we are doing there, and the government needs to be complimented for a good job being done at that site. And I noticed that it's going to be expanded, which is good. And I hope that the new Minister of the Environment can continue with the same pace or even faster than the last minister in ensuring that the botanical garden, because it is the Barbados Labour Party's program, started by the last BLP government between 1994 and 2008. The Democratic Labour Party did nothing to ensure that this year become a reality. And I want to ask the government to continue to ensure that this property is almost completed before the end of this 5-year period. We have to move forward it. And all the work that is being done to beautify across Barbados, I hope that we can continue that program. It's a good program, planting trees and ensuring that the environment is kept clean. It is good, and we need to continue it across Barbados. As far as the acquisition of land at Bush Hall is concerned, I think the member for St. Philip West spoke admirably on this, that blocks are part of our society, part of our heritage, and we need to understand that the community needs to own these blocks. I think the community, there was a time when the community owned the blocks. By owning, I mean they participated in the blocks. I grew up in a place called Newbury, just east of Gun Hill, and I used to be on the block too. I used to be there. We used to go there, play dominoes, play cards, but wholesome activity. Today, the community does not own the blocks, and the blocks are now looked upon as separate and distinct, so that any old thing can go on in these blocks. And I think it is time, though, our legal fraternity pays some attention to the blocks. I think the legal fraternity has now gone astray, and I talk about the whole question of law and order. We need to pay some attention to those blocks. I think the police needs to visit the blocks and be part of it. I think we need to, so that when this happens, where the community owns the blocks, you have persons participating, so that they know what goes on these blocks. It is not always a case where you have bad behavior, and unlawful activities going on. So if the community owns the block, then they can demand that a number of things happen, improving the way how people behave. It is an education in itself, Mr. Speaker. It is a life experience. I can tell you that when we were on the blocks, when we never called them blocks in those days, but when we go to these sites, there were a number of times where the older people, older men, older women come together and help to guide the youth. And I'm saying that the time has come for us. People criticize that there's increased crime. And why is there increased crime? Because parenting has not been up to date. A number of times your parents, children blame their mothers and fathers because lack of guidance, and blame the community too. Because we know, Mr. Speaker, that it takes a community to raise children. And I'm saying that the whole experience of the blocks need to be put in its perspective by the cultural ministry. The cultural ministry must get out there along with the various stakeholders. I noted that the former minister of youth he was very instrumental in the building blocks, and I want to compliment him for that. He didn't get to St. George yet, but I want to say to him that we stand ready. We have enough land there that can be Crown lands again, Mr. Speaker, Crown lands that can be utilized. The government is not utilizing the land that they own properly at all. And that does not mean the present minister, it means former ministers, including me.
Yes, including you.
Yeah, we did not, we because you see, time we acquire, but we do not acquire and use it at the same time. And therefore the public sometimes asks, is this really for a public purpose, or you just acquire because you may have the money? You need to acquire land and use it immediately. And I hope that the hospital, the QEH, can utilize this land that is being acquired for them because they have a need for it. The Union Hospital is cramped. It's cramped, Mr. Speaker. They need to open up. They need more parking, need more land for better buildings. They need to renovate, because I will tell you this, Mr. Speaker, I don't know how much you know. I'm sure you're a man who have traveled a lot, and most of our members have traveled. There are some hospitals that always have a construction site on them. There's some hospital in New York and in some of the developed world that have a permanent maintenance department where they expand, where they rejuvenate, and so on and so forth. So that the hospital itself needs to have room, not only for parking, because I believe that this is for parking, but also for expansion. In some jurisdiction, I can think in terms of Mississauga, where you have a complete block, a square, 2 miles long, where the hospital owns all this property. And the hospital, the QEH, if you look at Mariners Road, the land to the east of the Mariners Road is owned by the Crown. The land to the north is owned by the Crown, get the old hospital. And the land to the south is owned by the Crown. So you have all around there owned by the Crown. I made mention to this fact when we were campaigning in the last election. St. Michael in itself, the urban quarter, need a new lease on life. You have too many derelict properties across St. Michael that needs to be knocked down, needs to be cleaned up. Not only the Ministry of Education that owns a lot of property, as told my dear friend, my dear daughter Cynthia, who's no Minister of Education, doing a good job. But we need, not only in that ministry, but all across the ministries, derelict properties. Look at your garrison. If you go to the garrison, Mr. Speaker, you have a number of old buildings there that was housed by the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of, not Environment, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Town Planning Department. The old, where it has, then it has CXC. CXC used to occupy some of the buildings there. and so on. And I heard the member talk about you want at Glenderry, buildings at Glenderry as well. We need to clean up all these buildings. We need to do something about it. And I am sure that employment can be generated, because it was this political party, Mr. Speaker, that said we're going to create 30,000 jobs. It was the former Prime Minister, Owen Arthur, right? Excellent Owen Arthur, who talked about creating of 30,000, and we are part of it. We can create more jobs opportunity for persons who are now unemployed. We can create employment for those persons by cleaning up all across the urban corridor into the rural corridor. I am saying that opportunities exist. We need to have more money being spent, and we need to ask the private sector to put some money in this program as well, because they're standing to benefit. The private sector asks, how can we control law and order? How can we control crime? They can help. Let the private sector, and I remember I made mention to this in this parliament, that the whole aspect of capitalism, Mr. Speaker, I don't know, you heard this, have ingrained in us a need for profit, and that's what has caused this whole system that we now know. And we got in here and we talk about Black Life Matters. Black life doesn't matter, or white life or whatever, until we change the whole system of capitalism, until we change this profit motive. Because it's the motive, Mr. Speaker, if you follow carefully, it's the motive for profit, that is driving our economy, that is driving our people. And unless we put a stop to it and look at a system where we not only look at profit, but we look at how we help one another, then we will understand that we need to shift, and we need a shift at this point in time. We need that shift, and the private sector must not only talk about the need for profit, the need for making, so that you see them in their financial statement. You made profit last year, which is higher than a year before, and it goes on and on and on. And you make profit upon profit, but you're not investing in the young people. But yet you talk about crime. Yet you talk about too much activity. Yet you talk about one man must control it. It's not so. It takes the whole community, Mr. Speaker, to control criminal activity in our thing. So don't blame the AG. Don't say, well, I can blame the AG because crime has increased. You got to blame the society. And you have to be able to say, we want to help. If everybody helps, then we have a good society. I am proud of what we did for the COVID time. During the COVID, everybody shut down. Everybody did their best, and we have a low rate. And the reason for this, because the people in the society buying in. We need more people buying in to what we are doing, and we want to encourage the minister to do the things that we have suggested, work on this acquisition, and let us see how we can ask the various entities, the QE Hall H, the persons look at the ministry looking after the housing for the DMLC board, and all the other ministries who are looking after these various things, to get on the ball, and let's have a society that is good for our people. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable for Christchurch, East Central. West Central, sorry. Christchurch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. All you had to do was say the epicenter of Christchurch. That would suffice. I want to start, first of all, because it would be remiss of me not to add my 10 cents worth, of course, to this resolution, especially as it relates to the building blocks. And let me first thank the ministry, my former ministry, the Ministry of Youth and Community Empowerment, and the officers certainly, for staying the course and having that kindred association with me as I walked that road in order to realize the dreams of our Barbadian young people, and especially the Bajan dream. But that's what I like to call it, Mr. Speaker, sir. Young persons in this country must be able to dream the Barbadian or Bajan dream. But I want to start out with my personal maxim, which speaks to the fact that a mind stretched by a new experience and a good experience shall never go back to its old dimension. And Mr. Speaker, when I first conceptualized the idea of a building blocks project, some persons in Barbados thought it was the most whimsical thing they have ever heard. Some laughed. It was sometimes, to some, the biggest joke ever. I remember at one time, a gentleman met me on the streets and says, "Minister, you got that idea from out the sky?" I said, I was minded to tell him the only thing that came out of the sky was the manner that went into the pockets, the $3 million or so that was spent on catering during the last 10 decades. That is what dropped out the sky. That manner that went into the pockets and not to augment the cause of our young people. That's what dropped out the sky. Someone asked me if it was something from a Chicken Little episode. If it dropped into my brain like how the hair corn dropped down in Chicken Little, thought the sky was falling on Chicken Little. And I say to the person, well, if it was a Chicken Little moment, trust me, I want a lot of those in Barbados. Because if it is a moment to cause a parting in the way how our young people, especially those that are disadvantaged, if it is the Chicken Little moment that they need, I will provide that. And the Prime Minister told me, "Minister, find other Chicken Little moments and let us build out our young people." And I stand here today, Mr. Speaker, to tell you that it started with a dream. It started with a concept, building blocks. And the name, Mr. Speaker, was on the lips of every single young Barbadian that stood or remained in that space, that geographical space called the blocks. And it was a concept that I asked Barbadians, persons in my ministry, to walk not in front or behind me in this journey, but at my side in the effort to build out the young people in this country. That was my simple and single mission, to allow those young people to have a tangible stake in Barbados as we know it. And then there were some words that came about. Blockpreneurship. And everybody asked me, why are you going with that acronym? They preferred me to say block entrepreneurship. But you know what happened, Mr. Speaker? The word dropped off the lips of a young man, and God rest his soul now because he was shot a couple of months ago. A young man who said, "Minister, you persons talking about entrepreneurship and we come from the block. So why not blockpreneurship?" I spoke lucidly in Malta when I presented that which was important to this government. And the Prince representative, when she reported to Prince Charles himself, he said, she's told him, "You know, the Ministry of Youth in Barbados, the minister is doing a project called Building Blocks, where the word blockpreneurship is now the buzzword in Barbados." And when he came to Barbados and met me, he said, "Wait, you're the minister for blockpreneurship?" Well, years ago, I conceptualized the Prince Trust, taking at-risk young people and giving them the opportunity, giving them to have that once in a lifetime, that tidal wave of change. Because once in a lifetime, only once, the tidal wave of change will rise up. And I'm saying that tidal wave that will cause young people to be able to ride it into the future. And out of this stratosphere will be created by this Barbados Labour Party. That is what I'm saying. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to take you through the project, because a lot of people in Barbados like to talk the talk, but they don't understand about walking the walk and doing the do for the young people of this country. The moral test, Mr. Speaker, is how we treat our most vulnerable, how we treat those at the bottom of the spectrum, the disadvantaged and the most vulnerable, how we speak the young people, how we treat to the young people of this country, how we treat to the disabled community, and invariably those that are near to my heart, that cause me to titillate in a special way the elderly or those in the toilet of their years. That is how you pass the moral litmus test. And this government, under the leadership of the Member of Parliament for St. Michael North East, will pass the litmus test with flying colors. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we started this journey 2 years ago, 2018, on the 24th or 25th of May, where we started to build out the blocks in Barbados. And I started with mapping and collection of data exercise. Me and the officers in the ministry went to every nook and cranny in Barbados, engaging those who live on the block, collecting information as it relates to their activities, their dreams and their aspirations, how they see themselves as having a tangible stake in this country. And you know what the response was from these youngsters? Minister, we have never been engaged. We have been always left like the proverbial sore thumb. Nobody has ever came to us and asked us how we could be part of building this country, how we could be part of ensuring that Barbados survived the test of time. And we have the ingenuity, we have the creativity. I said already in this chamber that almost everything great in this world has been created by young minds. It's not persons like me who are quadragenarians. You may be a septuagenarian or sexagenarian, Mr. Speaker, I don't know. But it is those young people, probably visionarians, I don't know, who will take their creativity and their imagination and put it to help buttress this country and catapult us to a new sphere and a new dimension of economic prosperity and productivity. You cannot be talking about sustainable development. Oh, these very fancy terms. Some become neologists, new terms that don't even exist, to try to describe the efforts of our young people. But you cannot have sustainable development unless young people are at the core. They must be part of that hubris. If you want to make sense about sustainable development, it's not a fancy word unless it has muscle and action to it. And so I say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, those young persons, you'll be surprised at the amount of creativity they have and the interest in doing something positive in their life. And I say to them, we are going to touch you with this new experience where you will never go back to the old way of life. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, after we collected that data and gathered that information, we decided that it's not only a building out young persons and putting structures in place in a physical way, but there must be a metaphorical and figurative building out of our young people as well. Young persons, and most of those guys on the block, trust me, Mr. Speaker, they have a graphic understanding of the intricacies of this country in terms of the social understanding of how things are supposed to work. They have a business understanding. There are some of the best business persons in Barbados, and you know that too. You represent a lot. They understand how to take 5 cents. They understand how to take 5 cents and make it 10 cents. Make 10 cents into 50 cents. They understand a lot about cents. Dollars and cents. They probably could have taught the last administration about some common sense too. But I say to you, Mr. Speaker, we started that journey by stage 1. And stage 1, as I said, was the mapping and the collection of data exercise. Stage 2 was the figurative building out of these young people. I am happy today, Mr. Speaker, to say that 133, 133, there's not a lot of numbers either, 133 human beings, personages that represent the blocks across Barbados, the 4 blocks that we started as a pilot project. 133 graduated in the training exercise stage 2 of the building blocks project. They went to their classrooms in the community centers. They went and they turned up on time. Not like some of us that who don't want to associate with the blocks. They turn up on time every single morning for the better part of 2 weeks to ensure that they got the training that was needed in order for them to augment their small businesses as we know it. And I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, the training was or involved effective communication. As a business person, you must know how to speak to persons. You must know how to communicate so that you can get your product sold. They understand about team building, and they were trained in team building. Because team for me certainly is the acronym for together everyone achieves more. So young person must understand that together, when they work collectively, that is the only way that they can achieve their maximum potential. So there was an area called team building, customer service, decision making, business etiquette, marketing, costing and pricing, and public speaking, Mr. Speaker. That is the course outline. And I must say to you, at the graduation ceremony at Parkinson Resource Center, I didn't want to thank the Member of Parliament for that constituency for allowing us to have the graduation ceremony there. 133 youngsters. And the Bible says, Jesus said, come as you are. They came as they were. And I embraced them, and this ministry and this government embraced them. And they were given certificates of participation. Some of them dropped out of school early. The first time they ever received certificates. If you see the glee on their face, Mr. Speaker, the excitement to receive something after they put in their hard work. And this is why you have to pay homage to these young people today. This is why you have to appreciate their efforts. Because it has not gone unnoticed. 133 young men from the blocks graduated at the first graduation ceremony. The third stage, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to actually physically build out the blocks. And we would have journeyed across the landscape of this country with the good officers. And I want to thank the officers from the National Housing, Lands and Survey Department, and certainly the minister and certainly the ministry that is responsible for town and country planning, because they move with a pace to ensure that the plans were approved based on all the incidentals that would be put in place. Certainly the EPD, the Environmental Protection Department and agency, who work closely with the project to ensure that the third stage, which is the actual building, physical building of the project. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, because there's a saying amongst our young people that nothing for the youth unless you involve the youth. You cannot build a community unless persons in the community are part of the building exercise. And we said as a principle and a policy. And if you check our manifesto, which is worth every single page that you can possibly read, Mr. Speaker, a part of the manifesto spoke extensively to the fact that persons will be allowed to benefit from small contracts, building contracts, once they are under $250,000. That the community must be able to benefit from these contracts. That is our manifesto pledge to Barbadians. That is a social contract and a reversible marriage that we have with Barbadians. And I, certainly as minister, would never divorce myself from it. And I say that once a contractor is chosen as part of the arrangement, that contractor must involve all of the youngsters, or most of them, from the said blocks, so that they can build out their own dimension and allow with building out their lives. That is what I said. And so the 4 blocks that we started the project on, the one in Silver Hill, Bakaivi, Bakaivi, British Hill, and certainly the one in the Pine. The contractors were chosen from the area. And about 80% of the workers that built those structures thus far came from the same very area. That is our manifesto and our commitment to the people of Barbados. That we will allow them to build out their communities. So they will have an inherent responsibility for that which is theirs. There is a sense of ownership, Mr. Speaker. And sir, that is what we have to build Barbados on. The fact that Barbadians must feel a sense of ownership of this country. And I did not separate this ideology from what happened in the blocks and the building blocks project. Certainly I encourage all of the contractors to give those young tradesmen the opportunity, the painter, the carpenter, those guys from the Pine that sit on the block when the days come, and those guys from Silver Hill and British Hill. The Member of Parliament for Christchurch West Bank, with the when we turned the soil the first day, and they sure you put down a block or two, because it involved every single person. This is not an isolated effort. Every single person in the community must walk side by side in this journey with our young people. It must be, according to the Member of Parliament for St. Thomas, that a person who I hold close to my heart, but not only because of her age, but because of her experience, all embracing. She understands the meaning of that word. And I embrace her every word. And I embrace her efforts. I embrace her efforts as well. But Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a serious project. This will certainly impact the lives of all those youngsters who were never engaged, who were suffering from the highest form of disillusionment, who were suffering from inertia over the last decade. And every single block I went to, one similar narrative. Minister, nobody care about we. Nobody care about we. Sometimes we have to do things to be noticed. Things that may not appear to be normal. But sometimes we do things, it's just like a student in the classroom. You see them being involved in maladaptive behaviors. Where a person may call them socially disruptive. But the bottom line is that they want to be noticed. Some of these youngsters on the block wanted to be given that opportunity. That once in a lifetime opportunity to make a difference and a change in the society. That's all they want, Mr. Speaker. So I don't mind the naysayers and the fearmongers about this project. I would repeat, any place in Barbados, what you're supposed to do is fear God, think clean, and aim high. Don't fear the success of these young people. And it's coming from those who will not raise a thumb, a finger, give a hand up, put a ladder so young persons can climb on. They will not even raise a hair, even if they were supposed to die from hypothermia, to help young people in this country. But the first thing they will do is criticize the efforts of a government who is adamant that the young persons in this country must have a tangible stake and must have a space and an opportunity to be able to realize the Barbadian dream or the Bajan dream. That is the remit of this government. And so, Mr. Speaker, I move with dispatch, of course, to ensure that the blocks were built out in a physical way. And if you go around Barbados and you look at those 4 areas, I will repeat. British Hill, you can see the change in the aesthetics of British Hill. Silver Hill, the beautiful structure with bright colors. Because these dark, derelict structures in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, must become a thing of the past. Not only is it unhealthy in terms of allowing vermin and insects and what's not, but it is unsightly as well. There's a song by the Merry Men called Beautiful Barbados. That song has no meaning if Barbados is left in a derelict state. If it is not clean and beautiful and healthy, there will be no beautiful, beautiful Barbados, as the Merry Men sing. And there will be no merriment in this country, in this government, and certainly a government led by the Prime Minister. There will be no merriment unless Barbados is clean and beautiful, as the song suggests. And so, we decided to put bright colors that represents a newness, a happiness, an excitement in our young people. We decided to put colors that will enthuse those persons who walk past. The tourists, as you will know it, because they must have a touristic experience. You must have something called community tourism. They must be able to come and buy a juice. And when you hear the Tamarind 3 block, which will be built out in the area of Bashal Yard Gap, those youngsters, they were insistent in their determination to have a kiosk that will supply. They told me that you can get tamarind from tamarind. You know about tamarind balls, Mr. Speaker, sir. Man. You ate a lot when you were young coming up. Tamarind juice, tamarind jam. They got tamarind coffee and toffee too. You can use the tamarind seed for its proteinaceous nature. I don't know if you ever heard about tamarind ice cream, Mr. Speaker, sir. Well, I'm saying to you that there is a wide spectrum of usage from the tamarind, an indigenous plant to our country. And when you hear young people talk about their plans to utilize that which is grown in their surroundings so that they can have a profitable stake, Mr. Speaker, the creative imagination of our young people is at work. And I want to applaud them for having that vision. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said, the 3rd stage was the physical building out of those very spaces where we use contractors and we use those young men who would normally lie on the block, giving them a chance to have employment. And we said in Barbados, post-COVID, that we must be involved in counter-cyclical measures that will give our Barbadians the opportunity to have work and employment. So they don't have to be big high-rise buildings that will give Barbadians, young Barbadians, the opportunity. It is projects like these across the landscape that will allow capital to grow. That is what we are talking about when we talk about these post-COVID measures. And the building block smacks directly and dovetail into this core concept of counter-cyclical. And Mr. Speaker, again, using the initiative of our young people, because they must be able to lead the way in our trust to develop Barbados. And certainly taking from their example, because in those spaces that allow it, I know the ones in Silver Hill, they're doing it for sure. There's something called the Block Beautification Project. A project where these youngsters decide to have a community garden to help feed the community. I will repeat, Mr. Speaker. These youngsters of the block, the ones where the naysayers and fearmongers would say, lock them up, throw away the key. That's what they were saying. Those same very youngsters are saying to us, and to say, and some will say, crack their heads too and shoot them. They may say that, it probably would say in this August chamber, these hollow walls, crack heads, lock them up, throw away the key. They're not worth anything. They're worthless. That is what you tell them. And if you tell a child that he's worthless, and if you tell you ignorant, what do you expect that child to do? Or how do you expect that child to react? That's the problem with persons in this society. And I'm not trying to cut corners, swallow words when it comes to the way how I feel about the way we treat our young people. I will catch a lot of flying here and across Barbados when I speak on behalf of the young people. And certainly those who decide out of their own initiative to form what we call the community garden. Those young persons decide that in the space where we build out as a block, they want at the back or at the side a community garden. But if that is not thinking about food security and reducing our food import bill, I don't know what is. These same young persons, they're same young persons, and they probably went to university and all the base schools, but they understand that if they plant thyme and parsley and potatoes, I was able to dig a potato in British Hill off the block, Mr. Speaker. It tastes good too. I should have brought a piece for you. But what I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, complex carbohydrates, man, not the simple sugars. That is what those young persons were able to do because they understand about food security and reducing our food import bill. Many hands make light work. I often repeat the antithesis too, that no work make light hands. We're going to make sure that these young people work.
You all remember has 2 more minutes.
And they're going to make sure that they have a tangible stake. Along with that, Mr. Speaker, and as the Minister of the Environment and National Beautification, and I want to thank my former colleague who did a tremendous job in laying the platform for me. I want to say that the block beautification not only will provide food security, but each plant that we plant, every single one, every single plant we plant in this country will help reduce our carbon footprint as we know it, and will help to add to the 1 million trees that we intend to plant over a period of time. Every single plant at its maximum capacity can sequester 48 pounds of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So when these youngsters on the block decide to plant trees, each tree is able to take away that harmful chemical, that harmful carbon dioxide, pollutant as we know it, from the atmosphere. The world is only able to breathe green now thanks to one thing, COVID, unfortunately. Last year alone, this world produced 38 billion tons of carbon dioxide that seek to destroy the ozone as we know it, and later the global warming and the climate change. 38 billion tons. each tree is able to sequester 48 pounds. Imagine what a million trees can do. That's 48 million. And you can understand that the reduction in our carbon footprint. COVID came along and was able to reduce the carbon dioxide level by 6 billion tons. But we must be able to do it in this small country. Because we can't be talking about sustainable development. We can't be speaking about carbon neutral fossil fuel by 2030 unless we do these small things as a country in order to reduce our carbon footprint. And the planting of the trees is one of the most significant things, as small as it seems, in order for us to survive the existential threat that was only surpassed by COVID, which is called global warming or climate change as we know it. And so, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say, the fourth step I go on quickly in this building block project is the monitoring and evaluation exercise. We are not going to leave our young people on a limb. We are not going to dissociate ourselves from them. We are not going to allow them to fail. Failure is not an option in this project. And so we have decided to use our youth entrepreneurship scheme, that unit in our ministry, to work to have an officer working with every single block where they will provide continuous monitoring, they will continue to provide the marketing, the account services, and all the other services we know that businesses need in order to survive. This project will survive the test of time. And I know that the new minister will put every single connective tissue of his being to ensure this and all the other projects started in the ministry, along with sports, because that must become an integral part of the whole conversation with building up our young people. And Mr. Speaker, I want to close by saying to you that development must never be seen as just an action. The concept of development must not only be seen as action, it must be seen as a reality. And it must be on the basis and premise of developing an attempt to engineer growth and social change. We in this government will never be accused of plagiarism. The young persons in this country must never accuse and will not be allowed to accuse this government of plagiarism, because we understand development as a tool for growth. It is an action plan. That's what we understand. So this government will never be involved in any form of plagiarism. We will not allow the young persons in this country to accuse us of it, because we understand that our single mission is to allow Barbadians, the young persons on the block, the most vulnerable, to have a tangible stake and to live the Barbadian dream. And in closing, Mr. Speaker, I want to say to all those young persons out there that when they stop doing the wrong things, the right things will have an opportunity to catch up. And the right things is to follow this government and our unreserved determination to build up our country using all the tentacles of our young people. I thank you and have a wonderful day.
Our member for St. John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support all four of these resolutions, not because they're from the Ministry of Housing, but they're all for public purpose and public good. The Dame Ermi resolution I support for obvious reasons, because we need to recognize those persons who would have contributed in a significant way to the development of our country. The botanical gardens, I support that because I believe that we need to have such a location, and I'm hoping to have not one as big as the botanical garden, but a national park at some point in time at Pool Woods in St. John. The hospital resolution is for obvious reasons to expand and to ensure that healthcare moves to a different level. But the one, Mr. Speaker, that I particularly want to support is the building blocks initiative, because it is standing on the footprint of a project that was in place under a Barbados Labour Party more than 20 years ago. And, Mr. Speaker, I agree with my colleague who just took his seat, because there was a point in time when that particular demographic, those guys who lime on the blocks across this country, was not paid attention to. And I remember the principal youth development officer at the time, Mr. Clarke, indicating that as youth affairs, as a youth development program, there should be a focused attention to those guys who reside on the blocks, because they were operating outside of mainstream society. And at that time, he put together a grouping called the Block Committee. And when I mentioned that this particular initiative is standing on the footprint of the Block Committee and a subsequent project called Project Oasis, is because at that time, Mr. Speaker, we had a component of Project Oasis that was doing a similar thing. We were paying the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic to construct kiosks for those persons who wanted to engage in commerce, who wanted to be self-employed. And at that time, Mr. Speaker, we borrowed from a discipline that you are familiar with, social work. We were using a strength perspective and an ecosystem perspective as it relates to reintegrating those youngsters who were outside of mainstream society, a subculture called the block culture. So I fully support this, because all of us remember Barry Jack and Woggy and what they did to this country, Mr. Speaker. All of us remember that episode. So when this particular initiative came about, it is good that once again emphasis and focus is being placed on a grouping that really and truly, Mr. Speaker, in some cases they need a second chance. And if as a government we do not provide that second chance for these youngsters to come back to society in a meaningful way, then I fear that once again we may see the onset of a couple of Woggies and Barrajacks across this country. So this particular resolution is dear to me. The former speaker will have indicated for 10 years, Mr. Speaker, Project Oasis, when government change was jettisoned by the Democratic Labour Party, and they renamed the program to a youth mainstreaming program that meant nothing to those guys who reside on the blocks in this country. Because you had persons who were employed, you had persons who were in school that were seeking training under this new initiative called youth mainstreaming. And you wonder, Mr. Speaker, youth mainstreaming for who? At that time, we now know him as the COVID czar, but then he was director of youth affairs. And may I say that his directorship was one that I don't think will be matched henceforth. And he fully supported the initiative of providing kiosks for those youngsters who were on the blocks, who wanted to get involved. I'm not sure if it is the minister of, the honourable member for St. Thomas constituency, but I remember the first one was placed at Jackson for a Rasta guy who was cooking food at that point in time. So I'm told that this particular project at bank hall will be replicated across the country. And I eagerly look forward to when this particular project reach my beloved constituency of St. John, because I have already earmarked a location where the building blocks project will factor into that location. So I agree that we need to spend some more time and to pay more attention, and I'm hoping that now that the Barbados Labour Party is the government again, that emphasis will once again be placed on reintegrating those youngsters on the blocks across Barbados. I am doing what I believe is necessary in the constituency of St. John. We are now starting to look at farming as a viable option for those guys who are on the blocks, because unlike popular belief that young persons are not interested in farming, I am seeing in the constituency of St. John that a number of youngsters, both those who are on the blocks and those who are not on the blocks, are gravitating to farming in a significant way. So they expected Honourable Member to grow food. So, Mr. Speaker, I know that in this particular project there will be 7 locations where acquisition will be the order of the day, because oftentimes where these youngsters' land is not Crown land. I just so happen that the area that I have identified in the constituency is Crown land, so that should make the process a lot easier. But I believe that this should go from strength to strength, and I hope that the necessary PR is put in place to highlight the good that is coming from those particular youngsters who we believe, or who some of us believe, no good can come from this particular grouping. So in my brief remarks, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to support this particular program, and by means of, again, paying tribute to the Honourable, the former Prime Minister, who at 2008, UNAFA, capitalized Project Oasis to the tune of $3 million, Mr. Speaker, because he believed that at that particular point in time, there was a need to reach out to those particular youngsters. And the thing is that Project Oasis, Mr. Speaker, was apolitical. We operated across the length and breadth of this country. We visited almost every single block to ensure that those persons who wanted a second chance was provided with a second chance. And when the former, prior to us, the former Minister of Youth Affairs, that little Hitler, said that those youngsters on the blocks sold the equipment that was provided. I mean, they talk about the Project Oasis as a weed whacker initiative. Mr. Speaker, we provided those youngsters on the blocks with landscaping equipment, and 2 years later when the minister indicated, look, let us put some money in these guys' pocket, let them clean all of the primary schools in this country. Every single one of those guys on the blocks that were provided with equipment turned up to clean those schools. So when they were talking all of the nonsense in relation to Project Oasis, this particular demographic that the Building Blocks program is now targeting, this program was doing things to move not only men but females who also gravitated to the blocks at that particular point in time, also providing an opportunity for those youngsters to do training. The Honourable Member would have mentioned certificates of participation. We ensured at the time that we were connected to those institutions that not certificate of participation, but weighted certificates that provided entry-level qualifications for those youngsters on the blocks who, like I said, required a second chance. Because as I mentioned, Mr. Speaker, we were using the strength perspective at the time, and we were meeting them where they were on the blocks to find out what they wanted to do. And then based on those strengths that we identified, they were channeled into constructive, structured programs for a period of more than 5 years. So I support this, and I hope it can be expanded in a way that will benefit not only 5 or 6 guys on blocks, but that it will benefit several blocks within different constituencies across this country. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wish to add my contribution this morning to...
You have the turn on my honourable member.
I beg your pardon, sir. I'm not getting accustomed to this new setup. I apologize, sir. I wish to highly commend those ministers who have sought to bring these 4 resolutions here to us today, and to express my wholehearted support to them. I want to quote from one of the distinguished leaders in Barbados, in the Caribbean, who said that the greatness of a man is not in how much wealth he acquires, but in his integrity and his ability to affect the lives of those around him. And that is none other than the great Robert Nesta Marley. And I'm referring in this respect, sir, not only to say man meaning the male, but indeed females as well. And I would wish to place a little emphasis, sir, in this cognate debate on the acquisition of the lands in St. Andrew to be able to bring a measure of hope and exposure and commitment of the people of St. Andrew. I strongly supported Dame Ermintrude Bourne, a distinguished female who dared to step out. And in the 1950s, especially in those times when life was so hard for most women, but she dared to step out, and she shone in 1951 and became the very first female member of Parliament for Barbados after so many centuries of male leadership in this country. And I think that is really most profound and is an indelible mark that has been made for many other females in this country to want to be able to step out and to get engaged. They are going to be criticized, they're going to be vilified, all kinds of things will happen, and sometimes it's male and female who will do it. But Dame Ermintrude withstood all of those negatives. She came out and she gave extremely many long years of service to the people of St. Andrew, which is the sister parish to where I live, and I'm proud to be the offspring of a grandmother and a father, of course, who lived in the White Hills, St. Andrew, and then he gravitated to St. Thomas, leaving the rest of the family there. So I still have a strong bond of family in St. Andrew, and my grandmother would have been one of those persons who would have been an extremely strong supporter of Dame Ermi. I believe, sir, that watching her and learning of her distinguished service to this country has helped to propel not only me, but many other females to step in despite whatever the consequences, whether we win or lose, but to show that we too have the ability, the capacity to be able to serve our country at every level in this place. There was no other female, sir, who sat in this honourable chamber for over 20 years, except perhaps in the 1970s, as we know, with none other than our distinguished Dame Billy Miller, who stepped in there to help to carry on and to help to fly the flag of women in politics who are distinguished and can make a difference in the lives of everybody, man, woman, child, family, the economy, and so on. I also want to highly commend the females who have for many years in all the political parties chose or dared to step out, to climb up, and to face the criticisms in order for them to be able to help to empower the people of Barbados. I believe too, sir, and I laud the effort just, I think, 2 years ago in December when the committee room at Parliament was renamed after Dame Ermintrude. And I think it was an excellent gesture to be able to laud the memory of our first female member of Parliament and to make that indelible mark in our history. It is a wonderful feat. I want to praise the Honourable Member for St. Andrew and his team who conceptualized how Dame Ermintrude's contribution to this distinguished chamber can be brought to the fore so that the rest of Barbados and the world get to know of her outstanding contribution in the memorial lecture series that has been established in order for us to know more and for us to try to, in every way possible, emulate her distinguished service to this country. I believe that the acquisition of this land and this resolution that's before us today is an extremely wonderful gesture, because many times people seem to think that rural people do not understand their role and that there are certain services they should not receive. And I'm sure that the concept behind the team that would have joined the Honourable Member of Parliament for St. Andrew will help to cement in the minds of the people of St. Andrew an element of wanting to serve, an element of gratitude and admiration for Dame Ermintrude, and therefore I strongly give my support to this resolution today. I also want to add my happiness, my joy, my contentment in relation to the Botanical Gardens resolution. This is another outstanding initiative that the Barbados Labour Party government sought to acquire more than 12 years ago, 15 years ago perhaps, the lands at Waterford, St. Michael and the environs for the development of a national botanical garden. Wherever we go in the world, Mr. Speaker, we see botanical gardens, we see pictures of them even in the media, the social media, where green spaces are made available for persons to go to recreate. Persons can jog, they can relax with families, they can have outdoor picnics, and so on and so forth. And I believe that these green spaces that are being enhanced by the Honourable Member, who was a former minister, whose duty it was to help to bring it to a level, I want to also laud his efforts in starting this project that we are now trying to make sure that the acquisition is done. I agree with some of the comments made by the Honourable Member for St. George North, because we need to make sure that when we acquire the properties of families and individuals and businesses, that we as soon as possible make sure that we supply the funding, because these persons are going to be awaiting the funds to be able to help them to continue to plan their business. I had the proud moment last year to be at the finals in Waterford, and I saw the potential of that location as we advance with the development and the expansion of the works that have been going on there. It is an extremely wonderful project that I believe will be able to attract not only Barbadians, but persons from the international arena who can come to host events, to come to participate in other activities with our locals, as well as to get an opportunity and a privilege to be able to go into the environs as they develop and they expand, that they can enjoy the beauty, the peace, the serenity, the tranquility, with an element of contentment, relaxation, and reflection as they hear the birds sing, as they see the butterflies move around, as they see other people and children playing and animals and so on. I think it is a wonderful initiative, and therefore I want to support this resolution and to continue to ask Barbadians, those who are into the business of horticulture and other aspects of agriculture, to come on board, take their time, give some resources. Barbados belongs to us. And this will be our botanical garden that will have the capacity to facilitate thousands of people at any one time We know we have the Wexmahall Gully. You do not expect, sir, that I would mention that. The Wexmahall Gully is what we used to call the botanical gardens in the past. And I had the privilege of seeing Queen Elizabeth, Her Excellency, in 1975 on her visit there. It is still much in existence. It still has the flowers, the plants, the animals, especially the green monkeys and so on. And it is really a joy to be in those environs in St. Thomas, to have a good time touring, looking at the exotic plants and so on and so forth, to be able to bring that element of contentment. That is a critical part of what tourism will bring to our country. And we pray that that demon called COVID will leave us so that we can continue to attract persons as well as locals, that they can enjoy our environs. I want to indicate, sir, my great appreciation for this particular concept of the botanical gardens and the outstanding work that has been done thus far to be able to let Barbadians know how to love and appreciate not only what belongs to others, but to appreciate and to care for what belongs to us as we develop in this small island of Barbados, our homeland. And the final component I would wish to touch on, sir, is the building blocks project and the acquisition of the property at Bush Hall in St. Michael. If we are talking about serving our people, if we are talking and pushing towards the whole issue, or the whole matter, I should say, of Black Lives Matter, I think that at this juncture we really must pay more particular attention to the needs of our people. Not everybody benefits by the educational system in the way we would like. The teaching methodologies, sometimes hardships in families, sometimes the way children are treated in the school, out of the school, and so on. Sometimes parents don't have the capacity to be able to say to their children, you must go to school today. Children say, I want to stay home. And that notion of Barbadians believing that everybody on the block is somebody who did not do so well in school, it must be knocked out through the window. There are persons who are on the blocks in our society who are well educated, they've got degrees and all that, but because of access to employment at times, they gravitate towards other friends who make them more comfortable. I am a female, and if I had a son at home at 30 years can't find work, I will say, boy, why don't you go and look for something else to do beyond what you are trained to do? But there are some parents say, well, he has a degree in agriculture, or he has a degree, and he can't get a job in government, so the fella here on the block, nobody ain't helping him. That is what we are hearing. But many of those young men and women on the block are extremely bright and smarter than most of us in here. They are street smart, but they have the academic qualities and capacity to be able to do better, but because of certain circumstances, they do not get that helping hand or that opportunity to gain the employment. I know that as a child, almost everybody, and it's a historical fact, almost everybody in the villages where we live did something additional to be able to supplement whatever wages or salaries were coming in. And so I can speak of my neighbors who worked in the agricultural belt, but they rented a plot of land from the plantation, and they grew their vegetables and fruits and so on. And at the end of the week, having toiled in the burning sun and in the heavy rains, they went to Bridgetown with their trays on their heads and their big baskets laden with bananas and oranges and mangoes and figs and different fruits and vegetables to be able to bring in additional funds for their children. It was a norm. All of a sudden, we have reached and we have arrived, some of us, and we don't even want to plant a little kitchen garden around our house, but we complain when we go to the market and we want to purchase something here, that those potatoes are too expensive. They have to be expensive because it calls for back-breaking activities and expenditure for the potatoes to be able to reach the level that you can bring them and sell them. And so that was a part of our development, entrepreneurship. Every village and every 2 or 3 little blocks you go had a shop. And the children in the household were the ones who worked in those shops. Very seldom did you see a stranger come in to be able to give the service. parents would be back doing something and the children come forward, may I help you? And they will, we call dispatch you with what you wanted. That element of entrepreneurship has always been with us, and it is a pity that we seem to have lost it along the way at some point in time. And of course, persons did not only do agriculture, but they went out to Ericot and to different communities where we grew what we call ping wing in my generation, but young people call it cane lily. And so my sisters learned how to plait baskets and table mats and sew them with the raffia. That brought in income. I even went, when I went on the summer holiday from my job, and I learned how to do smocking down at the training institute that was down on the Harbour Road. And those were sent for export, as well as many of those table mats and the baskets and so on, the trays, they were used in our hotel industry at the setting up of what we call the tourism industry. And so those are ways that people brought in some funds to the village and to the households to help to empower families. Almost every other household had a seamstress or a dressmaker or a needle worker. That is how Barbadians always lived. But we threw those ideas through the window. We still have great people in this country with excellent skills and knowledge who can help to do it. Our foreparents with the shops, with the sewing that they did, with the sale of the vegetables and so that they grew, with the coconut bread and the pone and the pudding and sauce and so they sold. They did not have that kind of training as we do now when it comes to the youth entrepreneurship scheme and the small business association and so, but there were extremely brilliant people who took a special interest in what they did and how they did it. And of course, I have to come to my own upbringing, where we were the animals in the yard. And every probably month or so, we will slaughter a pig or two. And we will go out and say we will engage the poor, so that persons can know Mr. or Mrs. Forde, they are killing a pig or slaughtering a pig, and they can get a £3 support. So when they went into the classroom, they were teachers who say, give me a leg, give me a £5, give me a £4. That was how we were able to get that pig sold. And so all of those are ideas and initiatives that our foreparents used to develop. How dare us now not encourage or continue to encourage our young people who are looking for employment because of the economic hardships, there's none, or because of the training they have. People tell them, don't do this on the side because you have a degree or you have whatever training. And so we have stigmatized them in a way that frightens me. And I'm really very, very proud to be a part of this government and of the government that went from 1994 until 2008, when we recognized young people maybe on the block, but not all things on the block are negative. Some of those young men are talking to the young boys and the girls who are coming on the block, because in my day it wasn't called the block either. And I know that the honourable member for Christchurch, West Central, is it? He would say, well, he knows what category it is, and he would use some kind of word to describe me. And I know that means long, long time ago, but it still obtains that our people have great talents and great initiative, and they can be very, very resilient as a result of the skills they have. They can become very creative or more creative. It helps them to become independent. It develops that kind of principle and that value of understanding what is hard work, how to be industrious, and to be disciplined and thrifty, because thrift now seems to be a word that has been thrown through the window. I am happy to know that this Blocktrepreneur project, the building block project, has been instituted. It has been long in coming, because we had 10 years where little or nothing happened, except you were a friend of somebody who was a minister in government or a member of parliament in the government then, and those young men and women in communities across the length and breadth of Barbados were left out. We know who are from the north that we got nothing in the last administration that was from 2008 until 2018. We all know that. And therefore our people were languishing. They were thirsty for opportunities to go to the Polytechnic, to go to the Barbados Vocational Training Board, to be able to go to the community college to do the hospitality course, because that is what Project Oasis did for them. And I am proud to have been a part of it because the Ministry of Education had youth affairs attached to it from 1994 until 1999. And I saw how young people came to the fore willing, they had an avarice in their heart to want to learn and to serve and to become entrepreneurs or to become self-employed or whatever Barbadians will wish to call it. And it was a travesty when the last administration cut it out to say that is to help people politically in the Barbados Labour Party. What a fallacy it was. And we saw our young people then seek to go other ways to be able to earn money in order to survive. It was wrong for it to happen, and I am thankful that the Honourable Member and Minister of Youth Affairs would have come with the concept of rekindling the fire, and rather than call it Project Oasis, then call it the Block Project, because the fellows on the block, let the business go to them. I want to also laud the efforts of this government, having known that those guys and girls, or those men and women, distinguished as they are, who are in Temple Yard, would have been down there as a result of a fire for many years during the last administration. This administration sought to go in and make sure that the electricity and so on and the other amenities are put in place so that the Rastafarians can ply their trade. They are black lives, they are human beings too. They are our children and our offspring. And I think that is extremely important. And as small as it may have appeared, it impacted tremendously on their lives, because I had a chance to visit them in 2012 or 13. And we saw what was happening to those people. They were cracking, and their spirits were cracking, I should say, as a result of being ignored. Today, Temple Yard is a place where those men and those women, those artists and so are plying their trade with an element of pride and satisfaction, because they can go home and feed their children and they can help their families. I think that is extremely critical at this time. I also want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the training that came through, that comes through from the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme is critical to helping those individuals who have the business idea but cannot go through the other steps to be able to make it the reality is. And there's probably no wonder why the theme for the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme says from idea to enterprise, because we've seen people with small businesses mushroom. And I want to advise and encourage the Honourable Minister of Education, if this is not happening still, for us to get the youth, the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme to get on with the youth juniors, where we had children even at primary level who were learning how to package, how to make. I had the distinguished honor last night to see some little children in Barbados baking. One set of little children did turnovers on CBC. In the morning of last week, Friday, I think, I saw some children in the school, from a school in St. Lucie. The Honourable Member for St. Lucie must be very proud. Those little children were making pizza, and they were using the skills that were necessary, how they would roll and mold and do the various things with their hands, and how they use the etiquette that they were taught to be able to work in the kitchen to make sure that the health levels were upheld. And I think that too speaks volumes of what our children and our young people and the capacity they have to be able to produce and to do things exceptionally well. And therefore, I want, Mr. Speaker, to say how happy I am with what the Small Business Association has been doing for years, helping young people to become business people or entrepreneurs, and to be able for their businesses not only to start up, but to mushroom and go to the next level. I can speak of a time in the administration of the Barbados Labour Party between same 1994 and 2008, where the Rural Development Commission and the Urban Development Commission ensured that when persons were given funds for projects, that they were able to get the necessary training. And our schools and community centers across Barbados were used on a weekly basis. And I think it was a quarterly kind of training that they received to help them to know about budgeting, how to do the financing, how to prepare the business cards to advertise, and so on and so forth. And we saw them do chicken, not chicken farms, they were not that big, but they were given funds for chicken cupboards. They were given funds to rear rabbits and pigs and so on. And persons are also trained to become carpenters and masons and all that. That too had been stopped. I want to laud the honourable member for St. George South for the work that he has done thus far in the area of the trust loans. We have to give or make facilities available for persons to be able to access the funds to start up the projects. If they have the business ideas, they want to sell some natural juices, then they have to have the funding to be able to buy the fruits and the sugar and whatever else they require, and to retrofit the sinks and so on in the household to make sure that they conform with the health standards. That is extremely critical. So those trust loans have really have been a good fillip, let me say, for what we want to see happen to our people. And finally, I want to focus on the initiative of this government to determine that we are going to work towards decriminalizing vending. A lot of people are running around, we want them to conform with the law, but we also want them to know we are going to make life easier for you, because sometimes that is all they're capable of doing. And so to decriminalize the vending and to stop them from having to go into the court and pay a big fine, and some may have to go to prison, and the produce they have is all taken and thrown on the ground, that has to stop. If Black Lives Matter, we have to change that. I am also proud to know that this government has determined that in order for a small business person or any business person at all to be able to access a liquor license, they should not have to wait for a year and a day. They must be facilitated in a timely fashion. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, how really happy I am that we have reached this stage in Barbados where this concept of the kiosks fit right into our manifesto pledges, and I was looking through again this morning, and I want to say the ease in doing business to get a police certificate of character. Sometimes you had to wait for weeks to get it. If those guys and those girls are to go and do the vending, they need to have something to show we are above board. We have lived within the law. And sometimes they have the little thing written at the back of it. We can't kill them for that. When a government in 2006-7 determined that we are going to extend to those people the opportunity for them to be able to work. There were men and women who want to work at NCC and MTW and so as general workers and people at that level. But whenever they came with the police certificate of character, and you saw behind here, she had cursed a policeman in 1945, or whatever the year was, or 1975 or 6, whatever. Then they were turned away from the job. And we had to work with that, because at the end of the day, some people don't understand. You can't curse a policeman, or you shouldn't. You cannot be disrespectful to authority in that way. Or they might have been in some bind and they owed some money to the court and could not pay for the fridge. And therefore, the company said, you're going to court. And when they didn't have the money to pay, they went up to prison and spent 2 weeks or whatever the time frame would have been. Why must people be deprived of an opportunity where they can go to work and work honestly, because at the back of that certificate, there were small matters of that nature that caused people to run afoul of the law. And so we determined these people must work, they must stick within the law. We cannot just send them back home that they can't fend for their families. We cannot talk about Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, and people being sidelined because of the environs from which they come, or the origins, or because of the state of affairs in their lives. We have to find ways of better preparing them for life and empowering them. And so I want to close by saying, sir, that the relocation of our vendors from down on Cheapside, down now to Spring Garden on the Mighty Grinder Highway, is another initiative to show and look at the environs they're in now. They've got beautiful kiosks, and the sales down there. Some of them were talking already, and they said what good business is happening, and they've got toilet facilities or what bathroom facilities. That is what you call a government that cares about the people. And therefore, I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the moment, and I'm sure that the people at Bush Hall and those men and women will be able to develop an element of ownership. They will be employed gainfully as they use their kiosks to be able to maintain their families and themselves, and to be able to become an integral part of this country, because once the economy is kicking over with people buying and trading and selling and people using their various skills and knowledge to be able to bring in funding, I am sure that these folks too will be an integral part of what we are doing. And I just want Barbadians to be remembered. And I know that Rome was not built in a day, but I'm going to ask the Honourable Minister who is responsible for youth affairs to please make sure that my building blocks project comes to a start, and that my guys and gals in the parish, I'm not saying constituency now, because we border so much and the road divides St. Thomas from St. Michael Northeast, from St. Andrew, from St. James Central, and so on. Just the road. The families are all the same, but the road made the difference. I want to say that we will wait patiently, and I know that our young people will be only too happy to see that they will be gainfully employed and that they will be so empowered to help their families and themselves, and that they will be able to add and help to build back this economy that has been devastated by the various elements that have impacted on us locally as well as across the world. I wish to lend my wholehearted support, Mr. Speaker, to this particular resolution as well. Thank you, sir.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the sitting be suspended until 2:15 p.m.
The question is that this Honourable Chamber be suspended until 2:15 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands suspended until 2:15 p.m.